Language is a huge contention, or language is a huge tenet of postmodernism. Remember, postmodern epistemologically, any method of trying to find objective reality dropped and denied as a method. Reason, I said reason was one of them. The second one is language. Modernists and postmodernists differ in methods of how to employ language. And that difference is driven by epistemology. Epistemology asks two questions about language. What is language's connection to reality? And what is its connection to action? Those questions are part of a broader epistemological questions about consciousness, which is what is consciousness' connection to reality and what is its connections to action? Its connection to action. Modernists believe that consciousness is both cognitive and functional, right? That its primary purpose is to be aware of reality, and its secondary purpose is to act within that reality. Let's say I'm in my living room and I'm on the couch. I observe my reality, I see the TV, and I see a remote. Then I'll activate my secondary purpose and I'll act within that reality. I want to open the TV, I'll pick up the remote. I look at the remote, I become aware of reality, I see the TV button, I see the cable button, I open the buttons and I watch TV. Right? But for postmodernists, consciousness is not cognitive. It is only functional. This becomes apparent in rhetoric and unmasking. So to a modernist, unmasking is essentially the recognition that words may not be used in its literal form, and it could be used to add meaning or remove meaning. It can be used to manipulate the literal meaning of the text. So we use objective measures to unmask those words, which means to see the literal meaning of those words. Right? This is essentially a cognitive task with the purpose of understanding reality. However, to the postmodernists, investigation, language, interpretation of that language, and investigation of that language will never end with understanding reality, because there is no non-linguistic standard in which to relate to, according to the postmodernists. That means there cannot be a standard to distinguish between the literal and the metaphorical, which means you cannot know what is true and what is false. Language just unmasks, and out comes more language, essentially. You cannot get outside of language. It's just a self-referential system. This fuels a postmodern contention of deconstruction. Right? Deconstruction comes from, I believe, Heidegger. Heidegger came up with the first form of deconstruction with a K, in which he wanted to uncrust words all the way down to the words. Deconstruction, it is essentially the latest iteration of that, and we will get more into Herder when discussing philosophical roots of postmodernism. Deconstruction is a never-ending process, right? And this is the distinction between postmodernists and critical theorists, by the way, namely critical race theorists. Postmodernists can essentially deconstruct anything, even leftist talking points, right? Even systemic racism can be deconstructed, right? Because language is only used to persuade others, essentially. There is no cognitive function to language. And so even leftist talking points can be deconstructed. Crenshaw, forgot his name. Crenshaw. I tend to remember their last name for some reason. I never remember the first name. Crenshaw, she, not the representative, but she's a intersectionality. She's big on intersectionality. I think she in some shape or form founded intersectionality, and her mapping margins. I believe that's the name of the text. She marries postmodernism to critical race theory by making sure critical theorists' talking points cannot be deconstructed. So postmodernists, anything can be deconstructed. Critical theorists, anything but critical theorists' talking points can be deconstructed. And you see that critical theorist version of deconstruction inside the classroom. Alright, so deconstruction is a never-ending process because language is a self-referential system. There's no non-linguistic standard to relate to language. So I said that you can really see the distinction of epistemology, language and epistemology, in unmasking and rhetoric. So now we're talking about rhetoric. For modernists, the functionality of language is complementary to it being cognitive. One observes reality, builds concepts about that reality, theories about that reality, and then act on the world on the basis of that perception, of those concepts. One of those actions is social interaction, and language is needed in order to socially interact. Language is then used to pass on those cognitive beliefs. If language is used to pass on those cognitive beliefs, then rhetoric is an aspect of language's communicatory function, right? Rhetoric is an aspect, and it helps the subject, right, the individual, release their concepts about the world in a more effective manner, right? So here's an example of this. In English class, you will learn of rhetorical devices, right? Like rhetorical questions, like allusion. All of these aid in the effectiveness of cognition during linguistic communication. However, postmodernist language is not cognitive because language is not connected to reality. Remember, there is no non-linguistic standard in which language relates to. It cannot be used to be aware of the world. And so language then is only used to persuade people in the absence of cognition, in the absence of having a cognitive function, essentially. This idea is promulgated in Rorty, Richard Rorty. He quotes in his the contingency of language, the world does not tell us what language games to play. He also quotes, human languages are just human creations. Right? Since language is just a human creation, then it cannot tell us about reality. Instead, we have to try to persuade others of what we believe with our language. By the way, Rorty was not as extreme as the other postmodernists. He believed that language should be used to resolve conflicts. Others had a more pessimistic view on conflict relations and They thought that language should instead be used as a weapon.